Alright, we're going to continue with adding and subtracting rational expressions, but this time we're going to throw some binomials in the denominator. And actually trinomials as well, but the trinomials will be able to be factored and they'll turn into binomials. Okay, the steps are the same. The difference here is you will have to factor first whenever possible. Alright, again I want to emphasize you need to find the lowest common denominator. This is why you have to factor first to see if there are common factors. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. When you see something like this, you should know that there are actually brackets like this. Okay? And the reason I say this is our common denominator, we can't just say, oh, I see a p and I have a -2 and a +1, let's make that -1. It doesn't work that way. Okay? When you see something like this, the least common denominator, we need the factor p + 1. Okay? So that's why I want you to think about having brackets around both terms like this. Okay, so that's my least common denominator. So what have I done to the first fraction? I've multiplied by p + 1. So let's multiply the numerator times p + 1. What have I done to the second fraction? I've multiplied by p - 2. So let's take p3 and multiply by p - 2. Okay, now our denominator is p - 2, p + 1. Don't multiply it or expand it. Leave it factored. You can always leave it factored. And we do that in case something can cancel out, but also you don't need to multiply this out. You don't need to multiply it to a general form. Okay, but the numerator we will have to multiply out because we're going to have to collect like terms. So let's take a look at this first. P - 1 times p + 1. This is p squared plus p minus p - 1. And then let's multiply this. So I get plus p squared minus 2p plus 3. Okay. Let's put this together. So p squared plus p squared is 2p squared. This actually cancels out, and I have plus p minus 7 over p + 1. Now you should quickly look at the numerator and say, can I factor this? Very rarely will you be able to factor it, but if it does, then you would have to see, could you cancel out a factor so that it would simplify it further. Okay, in this case it cannot be factored. So let's look at the denominator. P cannot be 2, p cannot be -1. Alright? Next one. Alright? Alright, let's factor this. So our first step in the denominator is to factor. E - 3, nothing I can do in that one, but here I have 3 minus e and 3 plus e. Okay, now this is a nice little trick here. We're looking for the least common denominator, the lowest common denominator. And what do you remember about these two? Alright, they are actually the same except that there's a factor of -1 that needs to be taken out. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave the first term, and it's subtract, right? There's a subtract there. Okay, I'm not doing anything here. I'm not doing anything here. But what I'm going to do with this 3 minus e is I'm going to take out a -1 and turn this into e - 3. Okay, if you're not sure why, 3 minus e equals, if I take out a -1, I get -3 plus e. So this is -1 times e - 3. Alright, these two things are, alright, if you're saying, wait a second, wait, why can I just take out a -1? Well, I haven't really taken it out, I've kind of moved it to the front. You know, if you multiplied this back, you'd get -e + 3, which is what you had originally. Okay, so it's basically just kind of rearranging it. I haven't changed it, they still equal. Okay, and the reason I do this is now this is a already common factor. I don't have to add an e minus 3 into the denominator. Okay, so let's now find this common denominator. There will be an e minus 3 and there will be a 3 plus e. Okay, and now I'm going to take these two negatives, all right, and make it a positive. And you're saying, well, wait a second, how can I do that? Well, this negative 1, I could also write it up here, okay, and multiply like that. So then that allows me to take that negative 1 and eliminate that plus sign, or sorry, that negative sign. Okay, so then I have 3e, and this one I actually haven't changed. This is what my denominator was. I haven't put new factors there. Okay, now just looking back at this numerator, what have I done to this one? I've multiplied it by 3 plus e. Okay, so that's a tricky question. What I would do is I would go and try this on a separate piece of paper and then come back and check to see if you know what you're doing. Okay, definitely a little bit of a glitch there with that e minus 3 where we have to kind of factor out the negative 1. So let's simplify this. 6 plus 2e plus 3e all over e minus 3, 3 plus e. I can simplify this further. 6 plus 5e over e minus 3, 3 plus e. E cannot be 3, and e cannot be negative 3. Okay, so that's actually a very tricky one. This one maybe looks worse, but it's actually quite simple. Okay, so we'll factor first x minus 7, x plus 7, and here I get x plus 7, x plus 7. What is the least or lowest common denominator? What do I need both denominators to have? Well, I need an x minus 7. So I'm going to put that for both. I need one x plus 7. I see that here, but I also see I need 2 here. So that means I need 2 x plus 7s. So that's the lowest denominator that has all factors in common. What have I done to this fraction? I multiplied by x plus 7. What have I done to this fraction? I've multiplied by x minus 7. Okay, so take a quick look at that and see if that makes sense to you. All right, multiplying out 7x plus 49 plus 3x minus 21. And this is all over this denominator. One more step. 10x plus 28 over x minus 7, x plus 7, x plus 7. Okay, and then we should do a quick check. Can we factor the numerator? Okay, the numerator, yeah, we could factor. We could take a 2 out, and then you would have 5x plus 14. But you can see there is no common factor, then it won't help us to simplify anything. So I'm not going to factor here. Okay, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. If for some reason you looked at this and you could take, let's say you took out a 4 and you ended up with x minus 7. Okay, which you don't, but let's just say that's what happened. Then the x minus 7s would cancel. Okay, but in this case we don't have anything like that. All right, x cannot be plus or minus 7. All right, the last question we're going to do for notes today, definitely a tricky question. I would recommend to you that you do some practice with this. There's lots of homework posted. Every one is a little bit different. You're going to see what I mean with this one. There is a little bit of something different. Okay, so I'm going to go n plus 6, n minus 3, n plus 5, n minus 4. Okay, now if you did this, you'd be saying, all right, what are my common factors? Well, you would have a denominator and there would be 4 factors. That's nasty. If you have n times n times n times n, this is going to end up with being n to the power 4. You're going to end up with n cubed on the top. It turns out to be a pretty ugly fraction. Okay, normally that doesn't happen. Normally these are supposed to be kind of manageable, we'll call it. And the reason... Okay, where was I? So our common denominator here is n plus 6, n plus 5, n minus 4. What have I done to the first fraction? Well, I've multiplied by n plus 5, n minus 4. And what have I done to the second fraction? What have I done to the n minus 2? I have to multiply by n plus 6. Okay, and now if you look at the numerator, we're only going to get n squared as my highest power, which is much nicer. Okay, so my denominator will stay n plus 6, n plus 5, n minus 4. And I'm going to get here n squared minus 4n plus 5n minus 20. Okay, that's this. And then subtract. Now let's be really careful here. We're supposed to subtract the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to use a different color here, and I'm going to say we're going to subtract what we're going to multiply here. So this is n squared plus 6n minus 2n minus 12. Okay, again, the number of times I've seen this negative misused, that negative is supposed to subtract everything here. Okay, so we have to, I'm going to do it in 2 steps. You'll see how we'll get that negative into there. Okay, so a little tedious, but we have to rewrite the denominator again. And I'm going to just rewrite the numerator. N squared plus n minus 20, and then minus n squared, okay, minus 4n, because it's 6n minus 2n, this would be 4n, but I'm going to subtract it, and then plus 12. Okay, so simplifying n squared, I get negative 3n minus 8 over n plus 6, n plus 5, n minus 4. And you can see there's nothing I can simplify there. There's no way I can factor something out of negative 3n minus 8 that is common with my denominator. Okay, so n can't be negative 6, n can't be negative 5, and n can't be 4. And n can't be... What did we cancel out way up here? Okay, if you look right here, we canceled an n minus 3 out. So n can't be 3. If you want to make a little note, we simplified. When we had n minus 3 over n minus 3, and we canceled them out. Okay, we cancel them out, but we still have to say that n can't be 3. So that question, pretty tricky. I would say, you know, here's one common error. This negative is another common error, and then this factoring out is another common error. So 3 sort of tricks in that question. Okay, please make sure you practice some of these. So page 566, do numbers 3 to 7, 10, 12, 13, and you can also do on page 575, I think that's a review, and there's also questions on the My site. Okay?